hurling Molotov cocktails and chanting for death. Thousands of protesters skirmished with police in both Afghanistan and Indonesia. Just a week since it all began, unrest and violence has now spread to more than 30 nations around the world. Feeding on global Muslim fury over a US-made film that ridicules Islam, new hotspots are appearing. Have a look at the map right here. 1,000 religious protesters in Kabul, the Afghan capital, surrounded an American military base, running riot and burning cars. Violence also spread like a wildfire in Indonesia as well, with demonstrators firebombing the US embassy in Jakarta. All right, now with the latest on these outbursts, RT's Paula Sleer.
Police and protesters have clashed in the Indonesian capital of Jakarta. Now, these clashes took place when hundreds of hardliners marched in front of the American embassy. They took the police by surprise when they started hurling huge rocks at them, because until now, the demonstrations that have been taking place across Indonesia, which is the world's most populous Muslim nation, have been peaceful. The police responded with tear gas, with water cannons, and by firing warning shots in the air to disperse the crowd. But not before protesters had the chance to throw Molotov cocktails, to burn tires, and also to set off explosives. Also on Monday, there have been fresh clashes in Pakistan, this happening in the northwest of the country, where at least one protester has been killed. Hundreds of protesters set fire to a government office building as well as to a press club office. And this is allegedly because they were complaining that the demonstrations in Pakistan until now have not been receiving enough media attention. This follows clashes in Pakistan over the weekend that happened in the cities of Peshawar as well as in Karachi. We saw protesters marching, holding up banners and calling for the American ambassador to be expelled and for a boycott on all American goods and services. Now, also there have been clashes in the Afghan capital of Kabul. Here we've seen more than 1,000 protesters set fire to cars as well as storage containers near American military installations. On Monday, all eyes are also turned on Lebanon in light of a televised address given by the leader Hassan Nasrallah. Now, the Hezbollah leader has called for staggered protests throughout Lebanon this week, starting Monday evening in the southern suburbs of Beirut. He says that this film is the worst insult ever to Islam, and he has put the blame squarely on the shoulders of the United States. Also in Lebanon, the foreign minister there is calling for an emergency meeting of the Arab League to discuss this film. Now, the United States has been sending additional security. It's been sending Marines to beef up its security in various cities around the region. This is only inflaming tensions on the ground, with many people I'm talking to asking the question whether or not the United States is not benefiting from this violence, as it now has the excuse to send further troops on the ground. Here in Cairo, the situation is calm for the moment, although tensions are running high. You certainly can feel that the mood is extremely tense, with the possibility that any kind of violence could erupt any time.
That's our RT's Paula Sleer right there. Well, as the US beefs up its military presence in the region, some believe the demonstrations are actually benefiting Washington. That's what some Egyptians are telling RT's Paula Sleer. Having a look at her Twitter page now, she's also reporting on the no-nonsense approach of Egyptian police to protesters and how matters are just getting worse there. All that and a lot more on her Twitter feed at PaulaSleer_RT. Right, let's get some more international perspective now on the protests with the Foreign Affairs editor of the Chronicles magazine, Sergej Trifkovic. Thank you very much for coming on RT today. Protests, violence have been especially strong in nations that were recently liberated through the Arab Spring. For example, Libya. Why do you think this is?
I don't think it requires a degree in atomic physics to grasp the reality that in the Islamic world, democratization means Islamization. When Algiers tried democracy back in the early 90s, it was the army that had to stop the Islamists from coming to power. And likewise, when we had democratic elections in Iraq as the result of the US and Allied intervention, the end result was an enormous increase in the power of Shiite mullahs, who were, of course, marginalized under Saddam. And some of us who have been predicting all along that far from bringing Western-style democracy, human rights, and all things bright and beautiful, that the Arab Spring would in fact benefit people who take the example of their prophet and his early successors as the preferred model of political and social organization, have been proven right. Now, I derive no pleasure from saying, "I told you so." But I believe that the US State Department and the policymaking community in Washington were blinded by their own ideological blinkers. That, in fact, the warnings from many sides that this is indeed what would be the end result have been disregarded in favor of willful self-deception that was supposedly influenced by the image of tweeting Western-educated, fluent English-speaking.
All right, so as you say, I'm sorry to interrupt you here just for a moment. I do apologise here, but it was interesting, as you noted a few moments ago, that during the Arab Spring, the so-called democratization ultimately turned into that of an Islamization of the region. So it's also worth to note you're bringing in the American politics angle. Obama is going far, far out of his way, even risking domestic ratings, to denounce this video and soothe Muslim anger. Is that a good move, do you think, on his part?
It's absurd, because if that ridiculous, dilettantish video will enrage millions of Arabs and other Muslims, because we have protests in Pakistan and in Nigeria too, then anything will do. One day it's Salman Rushdie, the other day it's the Danish cartoons, and now this nonsensical piece of junk. So the reality of the situation is that it's not the video that's the problem, or Rushdie, or the cartoons. It's Islam itself, and certainly a large segment of the Muslim population around the world who do not need the cause to be enraged, because the very existence of the infidel is blasphemous in itself.
Well, as you say, and many others are saying as well, that certainly some of these people taking part in these demonstrations and protests have been just looking for an excuse to exercise such anger and aggression. But if I may quickly, I'm so sorry, I'm running so low on time here. The region afflicted by these protests have also now been flooded with US special forces to protect the embassies and consulates. With a security build-up, how's that going to be viewed in the Arab world?
It only means that the US is getting deeper and deeper into a potential quagmire. If they had any sense in Foggy Bottom and inside the Beltway, they would be disengaging and not extending their engagements. What do you do with these forces? Do you intervene now against the Libyan authorities that you helped usher in last year against Gaddafi? Do you intervene against the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood that you aided and abetted and put the pressure on Egyptian generals to cede power? Now, it's absurd, but of course the US policy in the region has been absurd and irrational for a long time.
Sergio Trifkovic, Foreign Affairs Editor of the Chronicles magazine. Wish we had more time for this. We don't, but great pleasure to have you on RT today.